Thank you so much.
Yes.
Why don't we start by introducing our guests on our screen? Tia, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if my name is showing as Tom Nagel, but I'm not Tom Nagel. My name is Tia Process, and I'm working with the city of St. Louis through LISC, which is the Local Initiative Support Corporation. I'm a senior program officer there. And in a nutshell, our mission is to build resilient and inclusive communities with residents and partners, connect people and places to private and public dollars, and support efforts to build capacity within communities. We're a nonprofit born out of the Ford Foundation in 1979. We have 38 offices nationwide, including rurally. A lot of the work that we do in my department of government investments is work that HUD hires us to do, most often related to technical assistance and training. But as you may already know, the work that we're doing that's specific to St. Louis will be developing the consolidated plan for submission to HUD. Prior to my employment at LISC, which just started in August of this past year, I was in local government for 10 years and have certainly worked on my share of consolidated plans. And most of the people within my Department of Government Investments are former city employees as well. So we have a pretty good understanding of what the process entails. And there's other people on my team as well that we consult with. Their company is called Civitas. So you might hear me talk about Eric, Spencer, Byrne. They're not here tonight, but they're all with the LISC team. And and whenever it's my turn to talk, I'll take you through the process of consolidated planning. Thank you for being here tonight. Your volunteering for this is how we're going to have a successful consolidated plan process. So it's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tia, and we're very grateful for your expertise as you guide us through this process. And as Tia mentioned, LISC will be principally drafting the consolidated plan that this advisory group will be helping to guide here. So with that,
my name is Alicia. I'm from the 14th Ward Fairground. So all I got is back into the world design from CDA, Special for Development. Hi everyone, I'm Rourke. I guess Ward 3 Dutchtown. I'm at I'm in the 7th in Tower Grove East. I'm a professor at WashU and a board member at the Sales Community Development. And an SLPS parent. That's another hat that I wear.
I'm Raph, I'm with the dog company. I'm Tower Down CDA with them.
I'm Russell Houston. I'm in the Cross Square neighborhood. I'm the chairman of Bonds and Associates.
Dr. Barbara Mylan, CDA, Red Industry. Karen Greer from the Old Valley neighborhood, community stakeholder, business leader. I sit on the committee with Rick Line, Fairground, also the restoration of Fairground Park, and all found in nonprofit organizations.
I'm Karen McKinley. I'm from the 6th Ward, and I've officially lived in the city now half my life. So I made it over the hump.
Kaveh Razani, 7th Ward, co-director of the St. Birthplace Initiative, vice chair of the Cherokee CIV, also an SLPS parent, proudly. Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you all.
You have your associate.
Oh, yes.
Hi, Tom Nagel. I'm the public information officer here for CDA. I've been here a year and 4 months, and I'm your AV guy today. So,
Which I'm down with Ben. I've worked with 5 days, and I'm glad to have you here. And I am your ticket validator in the garage.
Great. Well, we just wanted to start by providing you all with an overview of the work that CDA does, just to level set and provide a foundation for the work that we'll be doing together over the coming months. So with that, do you want to share the presentation and we'll go through it?
sure.
I'll start off by saying just that CDA's mission is economic justice. We're a city department charged with deploying federal funds to build affordable housing, to provide social services, to work with dozens of nonprofit partners and housing developers on these missions. We really don't do anything alone. We push paper and we push contracts, but what we do through our partners and by funding them. we're really deeply committed to investing in a regenerative ecosystem and influence, and in empowering the community to drive development. When I talk about economic justice, I'm really talking about the city's economic justice action plan, which has three fundamental pillars: empowerment, community-driven development, and neighborhood transformation. And I think that when I think of the economic justice action plan, it stands for two fundamental principles. One is that equity is a precondition to growth. That we cannot grow as a city until we have healed the scars of segregation. That we cannot grow while half of the city is left behind. And that in order to grow, we need to be as intentional. There were intentional policies that created these disparities, right? Redlining and appraisal gaps and restricted covenants and highways and urban renewal, quote unquote. And we have to be equally intentional in order to reverse it, and in order to invest in growth. North St. Louis in particular, but also communities across our city that have been disinvested in by our city. And so the other principle that it stands for is that investments in people are a key precondition also to sustainable growth. That you can invest in the built environment all day long into brick and mortar and housing and facades, but if you're not investing in the community, if you're not investing in the people, with services, with empowerment, with resources, then your impact is not going to be sustained. So as part of this economic justice work, we actually did a survey. Before I was at CDA, I was the mayor's director of policy. We did a survey in the mayor's office that got over 5,000 responses, including over 3,500 responses from city residents, essentially asking them, what are your top priorities? And the top priority was neighborhood transformation. But when you dug deeper into it, you saw the highest priorities across all these categories: neighborhood transformation, infrastructure, children, youth. The highest priorities all came back to the impact on people. That's what. And I think we'll revisit some of this work as we dig deeper into this committee. A little bit about CDA's history. We were founded in 1974 to administer HUD dollars. So this was shortly after HUD was itself created. Cities across the country have great city departments to administer HUD funds. Then the planning department and SLDC and the Affordable Housing Commission were kind of spun out of it. So SLDC was incorporated as a 501c4 in 1988. I think of them as our nonprofit twin. We're both in this building, both on this floor. We share an office suite, and we fund a lot of SLDC's work. But the way we work is that SLPC is much more flexible, in particular with acquisition of property and contracting. They don't have hiring. They don't have to go through the same owners processes that we as a city department have to. And so that makes them a really indispensable economic development partner. It's an economic development have to be nimble and quick. The planning department was spun off in 1999, along with, at that time, CDA lost its community development commission. Up till then, CDA had always had a community development commission. That became the planning commission, and we lost this kind of citizen board to guide and reflect on our work. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to bring this group together and have some ongoing dialogue with the public, because I think it's essential to our work. And then in 2001, the Affordable Housing Commission was established, which administers local housing tax dollars and is funded by the use tax. Another really important point in our evolution was in 2012, HUD basically came in and said, y'all aren't being competitive enough, y'all aren't being open enough. You're basically, what they really said is, you're letting the alderman control your allocations. And this has become a pot of funds for the alderman to control. And that's how I said, well, so they sat the alderman down in the Kennedy hearing room, and they said, from now on, CDA is going to do an RFP, a request for proposals every year, where they invite nonprofits and other entities to apply for funding, and then they will award these funds on a competitive basis. And then they will do the board bill, and you all cannot change it. And that's how we've done it ever since. But it's an important bit of history as well. Next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we operationalize economic justice in our work, because economic justice is an abstract concept, and I think it's really important to explain how it impacts what we do. So a lot of what we do is funding cycles. We issue RFPs and NOFAs, requests for proposals, notices of funding availability. And what we've been including in every single one of them over the past 2 years is an economic justice index. Sorry, 1.5 years. Economic justice index that is based on life expectancy, violent crime. You can see the list there. A host of socioeconomic factors by which we've identified some of the neighborhoods with the most need. And then we provide bonus points. If you're in economic justice index area 1, that's 10 bonus points, 2, 8 bonus points, 3, 6 bonus points, etc. And then if you go to the next slide, I think it's really interesting to see how the investments that we've made now reflect that economic justice index. And I think, again, it's a powerful example of how the work that we do is guided by economic justice. And you can see larger versions of those maps up there. A few other maps that you can see there. So these are on your far left. This is the grant and investment map. Following it is the economic justice index. Following it is another really interesting map of community assets. So schools, libraries, churches, small business, etc. But what it does, and the way we use this is when we're investing in housing, we want to invest in your parks, in your transit, in your schools, etc. Right? Because we want to invest in areas with high quality of life as well. In the middle, you have a few different planning department documents, strategic land use plan. We are in the middle of a strategic land use plan update that we can talk about if folks are interested in. A zoning map, an area of our, a map of our historic districts, which trigger processes that we can talk about as we delve into it. Our 79 neighborhoods that inform our neighborhood planning process. A map of the city's vacant lots and buildings. A map of our flood risk resiliency. This is a really recent addition to our portfolio of maps, and a really impressive one led by CDA that shows essentially topographically where in the city is most prone to flooding. A market value analysis that we will be updating over the course of this consolidated planning process, and our mobility investment. So an overview of which streets we're making big investments in paving, the Green Line, North-South Metro Link, etc. Too much to get into in one day, but we just wanted to share them. Next slide. Here's a list of a bunch of folks. It's not comprehensive that we fund, but you'll note at the top there that we administer a variety of both HUD and Treasury and some miscellaneous other funds, including an EPA grant and some state funds. But what we're going to be focusing our energy on this process is the HUD funds. Next slide. And so how does CDA work? You have an organizational chart in your packet, but at a high level, we have 3 operational divisions. We have our fiscal team, accountants, the engine that keeps the money moving. And this is a testament not just to the fiscal team, but to the compliance team and the housing team as well. In FY22, we deployed $24 million in federal funds. In FY23, we nearly doubled that to $46 million. And it's really a testament to the hard work of our team, which has also grown significantly over the past year, from 26 about a year and a half ago to 42 today. Our compliance team is led by Rashonda, and it's made up of grant administrators and grant managers that draft the RFPs and the funding cycles, and they draft the contracts, and they manage each project. Each grants administrator has a portfolio of projects they manage. They maintain the files, they report it up to HUD, et cetera, et cetera. And then our housing team is made up of an architect, engineers, development analysts, who each manage a portfolio of housing projects, as well as folks who work on a home repair program, which has also expanded quite dramatically over the past year. Next slide. So today we're talking about our consolidated planning process, and that really affects the following 4 entitlement programs. So CDBG funds are community development block grant funds. And we spend $18 million a year, and they may only be used for activities that fulfill one of the following 3 national objectives. And actually, this is true of all 4 of these, but the others have more restrictive uses. CDBG is the most flexible. And those 3 national objectives are benefiting low to moderate income individuals. Who is a low to moderate income individual? It's an individual who, if they are an individual, makes less than $56,000. If they're a family of 4, makes less than $80,000. Elimination of slums and blight. Slums and blight require blighting study, but most of the city could arguably be declared a blighted area for better or worse. Or meeting an urgent need. Here, HUD is very restrictive. An urgent need is almost always a natural catastrophe. And that's $18 million a year. We'll talk more about how we allocate those in a moment. Home funds is $3 million a year, whereas CDBG funds can be used for planning, services, all kinds of infrastructure, et cetera. Home funds are only for housing. That's it, affordable housing. And that's how we spend them. So they're pretty straightforward. But there, as we'll talk about, there are a lot of wrinkles in terms of what type of housing we build and what kind of development products and loan products we offer, et cetera, et cetera. Emergency solutions grant funds, $1.5 million a year, which are used to support unhoused community with basic shelter. Kevin Ellison, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, our indispensable man here at CDA. And finally, HOPWA funds, $3 million a year of housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, which are used to serve and provide the housing needs of persons living with HIV. So that's the funding universe we're talking about. It's about $25 million a year. So over this 5-year period, it's about $125 million that we'll be talking about. Although also there are also some special CDBG funds that we'll talk about as well. These include CDBG CV funds, which are coronavirus response funds, CDBG disaster recovery funds, which were awarded in the wake of the July 22 flooding, $25.8 million. And finally, we'll be exploring a Section 8, Section 108, I always get Section 8 and 108 confused, loan, which I'll talk about at the appropriate time as well. Next slide. So the entitlement programs process, the way every single one of those 4 programs works is as follows. First of all, we have our consolidated plan that says these are our goals, these are our objectives, here's what we're trying to do with federal funds. Then each year we create an action plan, which says here's how this year we are going to implement our consolidated. We had a 5-year plan. This year we're going to do X, Y, and Z in order to meet. And that list, here's every program we're going to fund. And in order to create that, we hold a public hearing, we do a request for proposals, we do an appropriation, we do another public hearing, and then we submit it to HUD. Then, once that action plan is approved, we enter into a grant agreement with HUD, where we essentially agree with HUD, we're going to do this, you're going to fund us. So, and then our program year is our calendar year. That's important because right now we are in program and calendar year 2024. It's a little different from the city that operates weirdly on a fiscal year that's from July 1st to June 30th. In HUD world, not always, but for St. Louis, program year is calendar. So we're in 2024. And so currently we're in the 2024 action plan, 2024 grant agreement. And then 90 days after the end of the program year, we submit our consolidated annual performance and evaluation for our team, where we essentially tell HUD, here's how we did, here are our outputs. And that paper, not the full paper, which is over 400 pages long, but a slide deck summarizing it is in your packet if you're interested in seeing what work CDA funded with these entitlement program funds in 2020. Next. And actually, these are 3 excerpts from our paper slides, and this shows how we spent our CDBG funds. You see $3.5 million in public services. A really important point about public services, and this will probably be something we come back to over the course of these coming months, is that there's a cap. We can only spend up to 19% of our total $18 million award a year on public services. And this is also consistently our most popular, most flexible funding area. And I'll show you why in the next 2 slides, which detail what is included under public services, and it's a lot of popular things, which homeowner assistance, that's down payment assistance, home repair program, also one of our most popular programs where if you're low to moderate income and own your home and have a urgent repair, we can provide you up to $50,000 or more. Our average grant is $10,000 roughly, but we've done up to $50,000 home repairs, major home repairs, roofs, HVAC, collapse roof. I'll talk more about it at the appropriate time. $5.4 million in housing production. We'll talk more about that at the appropriate time. $1.77 million. There's an extra 7 in there. In interim assistance, and that's just LRA lot maintenance, and also maintaining some other green spaces in the city. $530,000 economic development, that primarily funds a micro lending program with Justine Peterson. $1 million in rehab administration, that's our housing team, and $3.6 million in planning and administration. And that helps fund PDA, about $1 million, the city councilor's office that provides us with legal services, the comptroller's office that manages our money as well as CDA staff and a couple of other things. Next slide. So examples of public services include youth services, and these are all entities that we funded last year under public services. And so supporting after school, summer school, and other case management services, senior services, food access. Next slide. And you see we're serving thousands of low to moderate income individuals through these workforce development, homeless services, neighborhood beautification, and other services. I'm just going to move quickly because there's a lot on our agenda, but housing is always at the core of our work. And I did want to set aside some time to talk a little bit about the city's housing policies. I do think, again, this will be a theme that comes back up through our planning processes. How do we leverage federal funds to most effectively and impactfully invest in housing? Because the need is extraordinary. You see here that we've got about 137,000 households in the city of St. Louis. 77,000 of them are tenants. 60,000 of these households are owners. Among the owners, about 15,000 are cost burden. That's probably a dramatic understatement, because that's only accounting for mortgage and utilities costs, not maintenance costs. And when we define cost burden is a HUD term of when you spend more than 30% of your income on housing. So we know that at least 14,444 owner-occupied households are cost burden, likely more. And they at least, when you look at the delta, the difference between what they pay and 30% of their income, that difference is $77 million for those homeowners in wealth loss each year. Conversely, or in addition, renter-occupied households, we have 77,000 renter-occupied households. 36,500 of these are cost burden, nearly half. And collectively, they pay over $173 million more than they can afford each year. And I think it's really worth zooming in on the about 30,000 cost burden individuals under 50% AMI, who collectively pay over $150 million more than they can afford, because primarily from that population of 30,000 individuals, 30,000 households, that the city's 10 to 15,000 evictions a year come from. So this is the population. So you've got 30,000 individuals who are severely cost burdened under 50% AMI, and it's primarily from this population of 30,000 that about 10 to 15,000 households a year in St. Louis are evicted. And so these are the really housing unstable folks who can't afford to keep up with them. Next slide. So that's the need. And here, on the other hand, is an overview, a snapshot of our housing development pipeline. So what this shows is not only at CDA, but also at the Affordable Housing Commission and at SLBC, how many units the city is currently subsidizing. And we have a total of 2,979 units currently in the production pipeline. I should note that that's over double what we've ever had before. Between 2015 and 2019, we subsidized 1,261 affordable units. It's also a much more diverse pipeline we've had in the past. Again, between 2015 and 2019, that 1,261 units that we subsidized included 65 for sale units and 39 extremely affordable units under 30% AMI. Conversely, you can see now that of these 2,979 units, whatever 134 plus 57 plus 24 is, so about 200 of them are for sale units, and then about 628 plus 100 plus 50, so about 888 of them 78 of them are extremely low to moderate. So except we've diversified and expanded the housing pipeline. Yes, ma'am.
Two quick questions. One is, can you slow down a little bit? And two is, this is really complicated. There are lots of entities. You're on CDA, Affordable Housing Commission, SLBC. This is also overlapping, I would assume, with LIHTC and the Housing Authority. So these are not like 3,000 unique affordable housing units, but this is like in concert with other housing subsidies.
100%, and we show that on the far right-hand side. You can see that the city has committed $87 million towards these 3,000 units, but the total development cost of these units is $683 million. And so the city is gap financing a lot of these life units. The for sale units were typically about half of the capital stack, with the other half being a construction loan that's financed by this affordable sale of the property. But most of the rental units, not all, but most of the rental units are life units. You're absolutely right. And the last thing I'll note before I go to your question is that of these units, 402 were completed since 2022, 482 are currently under construction, and 2,095 are in the pre-development stage. And then I'll also note that whereas the Affordable Housing Commission ones are not CDA funded, the SLBC ones are CDA funded, and that CDA funds SLBC to manage these housing programs. You had a question?
Excuse me. So I'm looking at it in the pamphlet, however, it's cut off. Is there any possible way if we can get the slide deck emailed to us so we can see the rest of it? And
Yes.
follow along?
Absolutely.
Did it send me, 2019 chapter 1, page 13?
But let me see the front page.
Yeah,
And I'll say as a general rule,
Okay, so it's in here.
right? I'll share as a general rule that we're committed to making information available to the committee. So whatever you all need, whatever the committee needs, please let us know. And within reason and according to our capacity, we will work to provide.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. And then finally, I just want to note our home repair program also expanded pretty dramatically over the past year with an infusion of $15 million in ARPA funds. In 2022, we served 155 homeowners. In 2023, we served 317. So again, over doubling it. And the constraint here is not money, it's contractors. Because there's so much construction work going on, and this small stuff slips through the cracks because everyone wants to be on the big construction projects. And so we're constantly looking. There's a RFQ, or request for qualifications, open in perpetuity for any contractors who are interested. If you know anyone, please let us know. And I'll say that as well about a role of the committee. Part of the role is to advise us and guide us, but also the way I see it is you're also part of the way that we can communicate with the community more broadly. And we seek your help essentially reaching out to community groups and getting this information out there.
One quick question that I have, I own 90% of a block that I'm developing in Oklahoma neighborhood. And one of my biggest problems is contractors, and I'm sure that we are properly vetting them. I've burned through a lot of money on bad contractors. So when it comes to, vetting these contractors and making sure that they're licensed and bonded, and contractors, sometimes their business ethics, will supersede them being qualified to be a contractor. So running into that problem, how do you address those issues when they have bad ethics, but then they qualify as a contractor too?
It's a great question. So historically, the way that the program works, and it no longer works this way because of the problem that you stated, is that we awarded the funds to the homeowner, and the homeowner hired the contractor and did the repairs. And that led to a ton of problems because exactly we weren't vetting. The way it works today is that we hire our subrecipient, Mission St. Louis, that does the construction management work. And what Mission St. Louis does, and our team does too, is that they have this request for qualification. So they vet them on the front end before they get any work, before they can bid on any work. They're vetted, and then the contract is between Mission St. Louis, the homeowner, and the contractor. Basically, Mission St. Louis helps the homeowner manage the contractor and helps the contractor manage the homeowner. Because honestly, homeowners are often difficult. They're mostly great, but sometimes they can be challenging. And so that's the way that we've kind of designed the program to address your concerns. Nonetheless, we sometimes do have an issue, and we'll have to kick a contractor out of our program, and they can no longer bid if they have a poor record. So we do vet them and try to ensure that quality. Next slide. These are just some of our currently open funding opportunities. So right now we have $9.6 million available for permanent supportive housing. These are home ARP dollars, so special home dollars, that are set aside for the following four qualifying populations: individuals who are unhoused, individuals who are at risk of becoming unhoused, that means under 30% AMI, individuals who are victims of domestic violence, and individuals who have substance abuse or mental health disorder. That's who the housing is for. The housing itself can take any form. It can be tiny homes. It can be a 4-family rehab. It can be a new multifamily. But the unique thing about this source of funds is that what we're awarding here is not only housing development and construction funds, but also supportive services funds. So our kind of ideal applicant here is an entity that has development experience, but also is partnering with a supportive service provider and has a plan for how they're going to serve this particular vulnerable population. You had a question, Russ?
Yeah, that, what I was a little confused, is this what, does this money go to individuals or does it go to property?
It goes to the large,
businesses that does this?
It goes primarily to developers, and in this case, nonprofit developers.
Okay.
It closes on April 29th, not the 30th.
One more question for you.
Yes.
What are the qualifications for nonprofit development?
Yeah, so these are detailed in our note, but I think we should have a really detailed conversation about housing. At some point, just set aside a whole meeting to
Okay.
dig into our housing process and the way our loan products work and the way we select them and our evaluation criteria. At a very high level, the way we evaluate programs is one, what is your qualifications and experience? That's one of those one questions that I have. And two, what is your kind of project impact and who are you serving and how does it align with the city's economic justice plan? And then third is just some automatic points for community assets.
Thank you so much.
Yep. And then the other funding opportunity that's open through the end of April is $6 million in affordable housing production funds for both rental and for sale housing. And in this case, the rental housing is targeted at individuals under 50% AMI. The for sale housing is targeted at individuals under 80% AMI. And again, housing developers, nonprofit or for-profit, can apply for these funds. But they need to put together a very detailed pro forma, which is a pretty technical spreadsheet. Next slide.
You said that was through the end of April?
That's right. That's right. These recently closed, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them. Just note that we just at the end of March closed $2.5 million for vacant unit turns and a historic home repair, kind of more grafting historic home repair onto existing home repair program, because we know that for owners of historic homes, those reparation and renovation costs can be incredibly burdensome. Next slide. And then these also closed recently, but we set aside some funds, not federal funds, for neighborhood plan implementation. These were local dollars. So were the dollars for capacity building, which is basically we assessed that there were gaps in the funding ecosystem for small grant programs, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 grants for nonprofits or neighborhood organizations, or even individuals who either need to build capacity and host a block party or an event or a planning meeting or planning process, what have you, need food, supplies, materials, whatever. And then also for small grants to turn vacant lots into a pocket park or add a mural or beautify a vacant lot in some way. So we decided to create these two small grants programs, which are what these RFPs are for. But what we're seeking here is not individuals who want these small grants. We're not ready to do that yet, frankly. And we don't want to run over 100 small grants through the city's Byzantine contract execution machinery and David business machinery. And so instead, what we're asking for here is a nonprofit who's going to administer the small grants program for us. And that closed, and hopefully we'll be able to roll that out in the coming months or by the end of the year. Next slide. This, again, is something that is happening, but not necessarily germane to this process. But with ARPA funds, we're funding 2 murals in each ward in partnership with the Regional Arts Commission. We're really excited to see those. They're going to start painting this summer. Next slide. Also a slide that was missing, but another thing that I think was included in your packets is down payment assistance. These are also ARPA funds, but we want you all to be aware, just of your capacity as individuals who now are engaging in CDA process and should know about our work, that we're providing up to $50,000 in partnership with SLBC of down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. And then we also are in the process of planning for our CDBG disaster recovery fund. That's $25.8 million awarded to the city in response to the 2022 flood, which we know was not a river flood. It was a torrential downpour flood that affected a ton of different parts of the city. Funds can be used to provide home repair assistance that emerges a huge need in the planning process. Lots of people who were not fully reimbursed by FEMA or by can also be used to support green infrastructure and recovery, as well as to invest in the city's capacity for responding to flood moving forward. So purchasing dehumidifiers, coolers, fans, all the kind of things that pumps that you need on hand after a flood, so that we're better prepared, because we do seem to be getting hit with a 100-year flood every couple of years. Next slide. And now we come back to our 5-year consolidated plan, which is what brought us here today. So what is the consolidated plan and 5-year plan? It's designed to align and focus funding. It covers $25 million in formula funds, and in all formula funds need to meet one of the 3 national objectives. Next slide. Here's the important piece I want to get to. So there are 5 essential elements of the consolidated plan that we'll be working through in this process. One is consultation and citizen participation. You all are the core of that work, not the only piece of it, because we want to issue a survey that we want your input on. But the way I see it is you all are not just policy entrepreneurs, but also facilitating our dialogue with the public, if that makes sense. And that's what we look for you to not only represent your own personal interests, but also help us connect with the public more broadly and advise us on how we engage in that dialogue with the public. The second piece is the needs assessment. And this involves essentially a lot of data. And I think these 2 prongs at the top just show how basically what HUD wants us to go through is a community-driven and data-informed planning process. And that's what we're undertaking here. One big piece of this data analysis is our market value analysis. And we've hired the reinvestment fund. We're just finalizing that contract with them that will essentially really go deep into our housing data and create a new market value analysis that essentially creates these identifies sub-markets in the city's residential housing market and assesses the strength. And this is going to be very important as we think about our housing policy. Because what I suspect will wind up, and this is going to be a fascinating conversation, but where I suspect I'll lay my cards out on the table. Where I hope that we might wind up landing is that it makes sense to tailor our affordable housing policies to different markets. It doesn't make sense to have one size fits all housing products. We need different types of products for different. The next item is an analysis of impediments to fair housing, which is required statutorily, and LISC will be taking the lead with Civitas in putting that together. And a key bit here is just making sure that we have fair housing protections, that when we award funds to the housing that we develop, that we also hold our developers and our landlords to high standards. And then finally, our strategic plan, and this is really the heart and core of the consolidated plan. This is a table that essentially is like 50 or 60 rows long, and it says, here's all the outputs. We should have included that. We'll email that out afterwards. A table, I'm talking about the previous one, the one we're currently under, that says, here's how many early childcare services we want to provide. Here's how many food meals we want to provide to seniors. Here's how many home repairs we want to conduct. Here's how many affordable housing rental units we want to produce. Here's how many floor sale units we want to produce, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what then we work to implement each year in our action. Next slide.
Are we doing one plan times 5 years, or 5 years of each year could be different?
We're doing a single plan for 5 years, and then we are also doing our 2025 annual action plan. They go together. They're submitted to HUD at the same time on November 15th, 2024. We will submit both. Here's our 5-year plan, and here's our plan for the next year of how we're going to implement that 5-year plan.
Okay.
And now I think I'm turning, or no, am I turning over to, no, I'm gonna say a couple more things, I'm sorry. We conducted an RFP to select LISC and Civitas, and so that's, we had 3 applicants, and we're very excited to be working with LISC and Civitas. We'll be doing a lot of public participation and hearings, and we did include on the agenda, and if you all think it makes sense to do for future meetings as well, I think it's important to just make these meetings open to the public in general. And anyone who wants to join can. You all are on the committee, and you obviously have your unique roles, but I think we'll open it up and create a space for public comment, because we don't want to have an exclusive process here. Yeah, next slide.
Well, on that note, I don't know, we shared that we are on a Zoom meeting that the public can access, and it's being recorded. I need to be aware of that.
Can you explain what this list is?
LISC is, well, actually, I might talk to Tia, but I'll say at a high level that LISC has an extremely storied history. They actually are a national organization that is making nationwide investments in affordable housing. And actually helped create the low-income housing tax credit program and advocate for its creation. So we're lucky to have a partner with nationwide reach and capacity in producing our consolidated.
Civitas, are they the same people as WCA?
Yes, but different individuals. And we did, we did,
One that one group kick them out, and the next group are.
no, I'll tell you, we
Okay, you'll
procured,
explain.
we procured the list, and the list chose to subcontract with Civitas.
So they back.
Different people.
So you-
I told you, Tia, that this might be an issue, but,
Fairly-
it
Sounds
actually,
like the an
I've had let me say one, real quick. The Civitas team has been really wonderful. We've been working with three of them over the past, month, and they've been
Do know.
extraordinarily helpful.
You do know that Civitas name come up. There is a lot of NGA here that name. It'll be an issue. I mean, not an issue that's not too difficult, but these, I'm asking you some light questions compared to the questions that the public is going to ask.
It's a really fair point, and I appreciate you.
So they did the planning process, and it was kicked out.
I think that's a really good
So I'm
thing.
saying that so other people can kind of, I can read the other folks later, but it's more to it, so I'm just saying.
I totally agree. I had the same questions, but Tia, I don't know if you want to comment on Lisk and Civitas's role in this at all.
I couldn't quite hear everything that was said about that. Can you hear me okay?
I
Yeah,
hear you very well. You want me to speak up?
Yeah, that helps a little.
Okay. Civitas was charged with planning with the neighborhoods, the 6 neighborhoods around the NGA. Carr Square, Columbus Square, St. Louis Place, what was that, Hyde Park? So what am I, Old North St. Louis, and it was one other place, Jeff Vanderloop. And so we got through the planning process, they was fired.
Oh, no.
Why would you?
They didn't do the job. I don't know why they was fired, but as we got towards the holidays, November, they was fired. We had to restart the process, and that hasn't happened yet. But they were the one that was doing all the community meetings.
And it's the same Civitas?
No, it's different
Who
individuals.
said it's some new employees, but I think it's the same company though,
It
right?
is the same company.
Okay.
Okay.
But also that, Tia, you may recall that I mentioned this and encourage you all to look at some potential local, consultants that we may engage in community engagement down the line. I think Civitas's role is very internally facing. The role that they're playing here is not neighborhood planning, or what they've done for us thus far is they've helped us draft our citizen participation plan and help draft our survey. So it's more.
Like I say, Direct, I appreciate you, but when they come downtown now with that name, we'll get some questions.
Maybe we don't need to. And
I just want to let you know.
it's a good point.
We can just leave their name off of all of that because, yeah, no,
But
I'm glad that y'all disclosed that. I just want to make sure I'm from one of those neighborhoods, and so I just want to make sure you guys understand. Not that I'm gonna call them, they can come storm the doors, but at the same time, once you start releasing this to the public, somebody's gonna ask you this question: how can one organization fire a group, and then the next organization hire?
And the point is.
And I think they use some of y'all money to hire them over on the other side with SLGC. That's what I'm talking about. I guess I need to, everybody don't know what's going on, but I don't want to take up the meeting on this here thing, but I want you to know that is a problem and it is an issue.
It's a really good flag. And I think the key thing to bear in mind is that Lisk is our primary consultant who we procured. They're a nationwide organization with deep experience in this area. And Civitas is assisting on some of the more internal facing, but we can definitely.
But as we are producing documents and we want to be transparent to the community, we want to just make sure that these people ain't getting, just getting hustled from this area to the next area.
It's a totally different group. It's not the same. Okay.
So will they be present at any of the community engagements?
I don't know at this point. I really don't know, whether that's part of the scope between Lisk and Civitas.
for community engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part that we'll be getting into right now. I could just, if I could share my screen, I'll just hop into the consolidated plan process and summary in terms of what we're going to be doing. A lot of it is kind of going to overlap a little bit of what Noel said, but not all of it. And then I can share a timeline with you where that community engagement comes in and all the other important steps and what timeline we're following. If I could just get permission to share. Okay. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Consolidated plan process and summary?
Is the sound okay, or should I mess around, try and turn it up?
It'd be louder.
Louder would be.
Okay, I'm gonna go see what I can do without breaking anything.
Okay. Am I waiting for him to turn my volume up so you guys can hear me better?
Go ahead, Tia.
No, okay. So, a lot of what Noel said is here too. You know, a consolidated plan for HUD funds like such as CDBG is required every 3 to 5 years. It's a plan that is followed on an annual basis and supported by annual drafts by the city, like he was saying. And of St. Louis is on a 5-year plan schedule, and the consolidated plan we're doing right now, as you can see, will cover the years 2025 to 2029. And the main focus of HUD funds associated with the con plan is community development and housing, primarily for low-income households and neighborhoods. That's typically the categories that this funding is made available for. As far as the development process goes, the first and most important step is the process of involving citizens and stakeholders. So exactly where we're starting this evening is the beginning of what we're doing. I know there have been some preliminary community and neighborhood meetings, but not to the level that we'll want to do in the coming months. Like this will include neighborhood meetings, stakeholder interviews, focus groups. We've also got a survey that we've designed. I don't know if you've got a copy of it yet, but we want to share it with the whole committee before that's released out to all of the residents. So that'll be a big indicator for a lot of the information that we're going to get back and use. And so that's the process that we're in right now. So along with the data collected from that process, like the survey and the citizens and the focus groups and data from the census, we'll use all of that together. And additionally, if there are any housing studies or other important plans of the city or region, which have been shared with us, those will also be incorporated into the overall analysis of information, as well as us looking at the previous 5-year plan, which is a point of reference in terms of past goals and priorities, maybe goals that were not met but are still important, and how we tweak those and make those pertinent in the next con plan. And what you get as a result of all this work is your housing market analysis, your needs assessment, which includes homelessness and public housing information. And that information will inform and guide the overall strategic planning process and the activities and goals of the community for the next 5 years. So all of this data is what is going to make your 5-year plan work. And when that draft is completed, it is going to go through a formal citizen participation process, which includes a 30-day public comment period and a public hearing, which are typically held at a local meeting of city government. I don't know what our plans are yet. We have to get to those details, but that's typically where they're held. And what that is a final opportunity for citizens to share their thoughts on the plan. And then on this list, what's not listed here, and Noel talked about it, but it's also included, is the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. It has also briefly been called the assessment of fair housing in the past, which is essentially what it is. It's analysis that is required to be done at least every 10 years for cities receiving HUD funds, but it's generally done every 5 years with this con plan process. It's a fairly prescribed document in terms of what information is collected in the analysis, but essentially it's an assessment of fair housing and fair housing practices in your community. And it could help inform goals that you might want to write into the consolidated plan about how to improve fair housing within your community. And then another thing that we did mention here is that an annual plan will be submitted every year that's in alignment with the con plan. That's not to say that the con plan, like if needs change, a con plan can be, it can be amended to fit the needs. Like, for example, the city that I just worked for, the city of Fargo, North Dakota, our 5-year plan for the last 5 years did not go the way we had intended because of the pandemic. So we had to make changes, go through that public process again. So any kind of changes that are going to follow the needs of the community will have the same process. There's actually a document called the Citizen Participation Plan that you guys will be looking at. And that outlines everything that the city of St. Louis is required to follow in order to get that feedback from the community. And we just worked on that with them. And I think we're at the tail end of that. We've got a pretty good document ready, and that will go out for public process soon. And Noel, you might want to talk a little bit more about that after I'm done. But then is the annual year-end reports. We didn't mention that at all. And that's not something we're going to do, but it's something that the city of St. Louis will have to do for each year so you'll have your annual plan, you'll have your goals that will align with your comp plan, and then HUD expects you to report on those goals every year, and that's often referred to as the CAPER, which does go through a public process as well. So, it's these different things that involve public participation. Sometimes they get lost in, like the newspaper notices, but I think one of the things that we'll really want to focus on with this 5-year plan is how to get that information out so people are aware that these things are happening and that they can have an opportunity to comment on anything that is being released that's associated with the comp plan and the annual plans. So that's kind of like that consolidated plan process in a summary. And the stuff that Civitas will be doing is very technical in terms of the actual system that needs to be this plan needs to be submitted into. It's called IDIS. It's a nightmare of a program, but whatever. So they are doing like all the detailed work to get all of these goals and technical details and narrative into that system along with the data. Whereas my role is going to be working with you guys, working with the community. I'm going to come to St. Louis whenever it's a good time. I think that's going to have to be pretty soon so that I can be a part of this engagement with citizens and stakeholders. But so that's kind of like everything in a nutshell in terms of the consolidated plan process. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the timeline, but I'll pause for a moment before I get into that. Are there any questions as of yet about this process?
I have two questions that are maybe too specific for today, but I'm an alternate, and so I might not be here. So I'm just gonna drop it now, and this is Molly Metzger from Watch You. I would be happy to also just talk about this later, but one is I'm curious about this connection with LIHTC. And I think one data point that I'd be really curious about is how much of the CDBG funds and other funds have been connected to LIHTC deals, because I think that's something we would want to be intentional about. And I have my own feelings about LIHTC. I think there are a lot of inefficiencies and sort of problems with it, but I know it's really complicated politically and otherwise. So, but I think it would be something that we would want to be intentional about. So I would be curious to see that data point. That's one. And then the second is sort of in the spirit of getting out of silos. HUD has its own definition of homelessness, but when you look at counts, like whether it's the point in time count or any kind of homelessness, like they all get different numbers from these different sources. So I think being able to speak to maybe like integrating McKinney-Vento numbers might also be helpful, just so that we have a fuller picture of what homelessness looks like in our city.
Yeah, we're gonna really dive into that because I know like the information that HUD requires through the HMIS is not that great in terms of like if you're homeless, you actually have to be intaken somewhere to be even in that system. And there's so many people that are homeless that are not even in that system, and they're not going to a shelter. They're not going to a place where they're actually doing that intake. So typically what I've seen other communities do is they'll have like live data, and they'll have their own kind of point in time count. And what they'll do is go out onto the streets, down in the woods, down by the river, down by the, like wherever people are hanging out, they do that type of outreach to get that. Now, I don't know if St. Louis does anything like that, but we are going to be reaching out to the COC and any other stakeholders that we need to talk to about homeless counts in your community. And
Right.
I can back up to that LIHTC question if there's nothing more about the homelessness piece. I think,
Go ahead, and then I've also got some thoughts regarding the LIHTC question.
okay. And my thought about the LIHTC is really simple. So, and I don't know if this is what you were looking for, but in terms of how like home funds and CDBG funds are layered with LIHTC funds and LIHTC deals is typically you'll see like CDBG funds used as like a gap for acquisition of a piece of land where the project is going to be built. And that could come in like the first year. Like let's say there's a place in St. Louis or a developer in St. Louis that's going to do this. They apply for funds 2025 CDBG funds, they acquire a property and they say that they have a great home project that's going to be developed and they've got a lot of backing on it and a lot of their funding figured out. Then the next year they could apply for home funds to actually be used towards the construction of that LIHTC project. So that's typically how you see that subsidy layering between these HUD funds and the LIHTC deals.
I'll comment further that I think we have a big opportunity in the consolidated planning process. Because one of the things that the consolidated plan does is that every year for every single LIHTC application, CDA has to certify that it's consistent with the consolidated plan. And that's a statutory requirement. And it is part of their application. They need to sign off that we certify that the LIHTC application is consistent with the consolidated plan. The problem is that our current consolidated plan doesn't give us any standards to apply. And so frankly, the practice since time immemorial has been every single LIHTC project is consistent with our consolidated plan because we need more affordable housing. And that's the practice of the policy. Now, I think that we could update our consolidated plan to give really clear standards, say, here's what we want to see at projects. Here's the unit mixes, here's the percentage AMI, here's the size of the unit. There's so many of them are just one bedrooms and et cetera. And so I share some of your concerns, I think, about the LIHTC program as a whole at the federal level. It's not the most efficient way to fund affordable housing. But while it's one of the largest games we've got, I think it's on us as a city to figure out how do we bring as much of that revenue into the city as possible. And it is like on the order of $50 million a year on good years that we're bringing into the city. And more importantly, how do we also put as much control into the process at the local level as possible? So that instead of MHC being the entity that makes decisions, we can be more intentional of like, we're only going to certify these 6 projects out of the 17 as consistent with the consolidated plan. Now that could also backfire on us. I think we've got to be really careful because I could see MHTC saying, oh, in that case, we'll only award 2 instead of the 5 that we did last week, right? So we have to be really careful, but I think it's worth talking about.
Sounds like you're not alternate anymore, Molly.
So, I don't know if this is a big question or a valid question. What does that, how does that come to play when you talk about historic homes or historic districts, with low income housing and, these projects?
So first of all, I forgot to mention, we will get you that data that you requested as well. But in answer to your question, a lot of projects layer both LIHTC and historic tax credits. I think one challenge is that currently with historic, first of all, every single CDA funded project that is federally funded requires an environmental and historic review process. And Roshana, I think, can talk a lot more about that as our compliance lead and really knows the process inside and out. Now, I think that what we see, unfortunately, is that it's only at a certain scale that historic tax credits become worth a lot of the kind of transactional costs. And so I think thinking strategically about how we can make it more accessible for smaller buildings, right, is really important strategically. But we see a lot of CDA funded projects that receive both LIHTC and historic tax credits.
Trying to get clarity, because you mentioned MHDC. So does the city have a set of LIHTC project and MHDC have a set of? How does that work?
It's a great question. So MHDC awards LIHTC. But
Are they the sole award?
they're the sole award. The city does not have control over the award of LIHTC funds. However, we do, as I mentioned, need to certify that they're consistent with our local HUD plan. And so, but if we decline to certify that, then MHDC can't award it. So MHDC decides who to award, but we have some on the front end, some veto. Exactly. And then the other thing that we do is that we submit a set of priorities. So historically, what we've done is we certify everyone's consistent with the consolidated plan, but we'll run a kind of panel interview process where we invite every single LIHTC applicant in. They present to a panel including CDA, Affordable Housing Commission, SLDC, LRA, Department of Human Services, Mayor's Office, but like we bring in an interdepartmental panel and we all listen to these presentations, and then we rank them. And then based on that, the mayor submits her priorities. And so the mayor will say, these 5 projects are my top pick.
Thank you.
Yep. Tia, back to you to talk about timeline, and then go ahead. And then we'll go back to finish the presentation.
Okay, yeah, so just quickly with the timeline. So essentially right now, citizen participation, stakeholder engagement. This summer will be the big chunk of the plan development. And then this fall will be public comment on the final draft and submission to HUD. So this is a more detailed schedule, which St. Louis has, so they can share it with you whenever. But it's just kind of, I don't need to go through all of it, but so that's that. I don't know if anybody has any questions about timeline at all.
Do we have this in our packets, or is this?
No,
No,
we can send it out. I hope someone's tapping my phone and I think there's a wall.
I'm reading it recorded, right? I think the meeting's recorded, right?
Yes. All right. Any other items that you'd like to go through, Tia?
Nope, that is it.
All right, then I'll go back and just close out with some of CDA's priorities with the consolidated planning process and what we've identified as some opportunities to improve our processes. And this is not an exclusive list, but I can just start talking through them. One really big one is just recategorizing and recategorizing some of our programs, because we do have that public services and a planning and administration cap. That these are 2 of the most popular ways we spend our money, but right now we're up against the cap. So one thing to just dig into is we believe that we have programs that are currently in one category, but could be in an uncapped category. And so reclassifying those programs, to name 2 examples, we fund a variety of neighborhood beautification activities under public services that could be under interim assistance. That an interim assistance is uncapped, that would free up some of our public services cap. Similarly, we fund SLDC administration, 500,000 under admin and planning. But if we recharacterize that as economic development and work with SLDC to figure out who are the individuals funding, can we make economic development activities? We can again free up some funding in our planning and admin. Yeah.
Can you also write the acronym chart on hold? Because there's so many names and I just love them.
We'll send the crew here the glossary.
Oh yeah, Tommy has been working on since day 1 in CDA glossary.
Yeah.
Good on you. Good on you.
It's 12 pages. Yeah,
It's basically a dictionary. Thank you, Elliot.
yeah.
That's fine. I'm just like, wait, I'm trying to keep up with all of
It's a great thing. Another thing that we really want to prioritize is neighborhood revitalization strategy areas. These are geographic target areas that HUD allows us to establish where, again, we can supersede or we can go over our public services cap. But currently ours fell into disuse in 2019 and we haven't reestablished them yet. So again, we want to work with this committee to identify what are these focus areas. And we can go, I'm planning to maybe next meeting or whenever it's the right moment, go much deeper into each, but we unfortunately don't have time to do this right now. Another one is Section 108 loan. What is the Section 108 loan? That's where we commit a portion of our CDBG funds to, as debt service to pay off a large loan. And so the city has done this historically. We actually just finished paying off our last one, around 2021. And what we did with that one was we, actually took out $80 million in debt, which we used to, build both, a portion of Darst Webby, and scattered site affordable housing across the city. And then strangely enough, we put $50 million into the convention center, Renaissance Hotel. But I should note that that money, 45 million of that came back in the form of TIF. So basically, what you can do with section 108 is that you can use your CDBG fund to like back the principal, but you can pay it off with other sources as well. And in this case, it was an $80 million loan, but about 45 million of it was, and I'm using the principal, the real numbers are larger. But 45 million was paid off through the TIF and 35 million was paid off through CDBG. We have an opportunity, and HUD has told us your line of credit is open. This is a process that needs to start through our consolidated plan. And there's an opportunity to start the conversation around that big opportunity bring a big capital infusion that we think is especially important as we think about sustainability with respect to ARPA. We think it's an opportunity to essentially look at ARPA, assess what's worked, figure out the best programs, and then explore doing something similar with the Section 108 loan. Recategorizing programs I talked about, creating / sunsetting / redesigning programs. There's a couple of programs that we know frankly have not been working terribly well, like the Neighborhood Commercial District Program, the facade program run by SLBC, has had a number of challenges. So we worked with SLBC and discussed, we want to re-envision it now and work through this process to create a new program. Because the truth is that the eligible, and I can go deeper into it, but the eligible use was never a good fit with what the program design was. So the program needs to be redesigned. Similarly, we also believe that there may be need to create new programs. One big gap, we talked about a gap with small grants programs. Another gap that we see is with the maintenance of green infrastructure. There's a lot of talk in the city about the need to invest in green infrastructure, but no entity that exists to actually maintain it. So then there's probably a million other gaps as well that you all will bring to the table that we can talk about. Updating our housing affordability and related policies. I mentioned before that right now we have a one-size-fits-all policy. We have our for-sale housing product and a rental housing product, and that's in the same across the city, looking to update it so that it can be more carefully calibrated. There's a lot we can dig into there another time. LIHTC Certificate of Consistency Standards, I mentioned. Multi-year awards. Traditionally, CDA has provided annual awards. I think it's emerging as a best practice in the funding ecosystem to do 2 or 3 year awards. So that's something that we can explore. Updating our citizen participation plan. That's actually the next item in our agenda. We'll talk about why that's important. And fundamentally democratizing CDA, engaging in dialogue with the public, and really looking for y'all's guidance to see whether and how we can continue this even past the consolidated planning process. Not to say that this entity itself and this group will continue. I think that it'll be good to end this at the end of the consolidated plan process and start something new, but we can take our lessons learned and essentially say, here's how CDA can do this on an ongoing basis. Next slide. Subscribe to CDA's e-newsletter. Thank you, Tommy. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, it's just been an honor to join CDA. We didn't have a platform, if you've worked with us in the past, for e-blast and newsletters, but we have MailChimp now, and people are finding it very helpful. So we hope that you subscribe and also give your feedback on how we can improve getting the word out.
And what are these monthly meetings but audio CDAs? Not really, but next slide. Q&A, questions before we move on to some discussion?
You did, mention this is monthly meetings, correct?
Yeah. All right, I know that was a lot of information to digest. We'd love to see a lively email thread with you all asking questions and sharing information. So we can put everyone on the similar email thread. I think next on our agenda is the citizen participation. Rashonda, do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and why that matters and why we need to update it? And I can see your work, but let me move on.
Please get started. I'll jump right in, but, essentially, it's our guiding document to see what, our residents want us to do, and, it's what HUD requires of us to, utilize as we plan out for public services, for income assistance, housing, and other categories within.
Thank you, Rashad. And the basic problem with our citizen participation plan is that, and as Rashad mentioned, it is basically what we have to do whenever citizen participation is triggered by HUD regulation. And it also defines when citizen participation is required. It's basically everything we do, right, requires public. But the problem is that it's changed a lot. It was static around 2015, then COVID hit, and it got warped because basically there were a lot of special rules issued about how to do citizen engagement during COVID. But then the other thing that happened is that it became extremely inclusive of everything. We basically now cannot make a change without holding a public hearing. And we love transparency, but it's gotten to the point where we're holding multiple public hearings a week. And essentially, we reviewed with Liz and with Civitas the actual regulatory requirements. And we found that what we were doing is that we were following the standard for an amendment to the action plan, which does not trigger citizen participation requirements. And we were applying the amendment standard when we should have been applying a substantial amendment standard. And a substantial amendment is when we move CDBG funds, not from like one grant to another grant. It's when you shift it from one whole eligible activity to another. It's when you say, instead of funding housing, I'm going to fund economic development. That's what triggers a substantial change. And then that's all it is from a HUD standpoint. But in addition, we thought we want to be a little bit more kind of have a higher standard than that. We don't want to go as insanely high as every single change triggers everything. But what we'll say is whenever we do more than 10% of a program allocation, that's when we'll hold the substantial amendment public. And of course, everything we do is fundamentally public and fundamentally open to the public, but we just don't need to. When you do public hearings, you also need to, Tommy, notice in the St. Louis American, which costs money. And what else do we need to do from a notice requirement?
Put it on the website, do an e-blast,
Library.
take the library and tape little signs down by the elevators.
So we're trying to make Tommy's life and all of our lives
Yeah.
and our fiscal department, everyone happier with a slightly saner policy. And that's what's described here. Obviously, we can't amend the citizen participation plan without going through citizen participation. So this marks the beginning of our 30-day period. And you all have all the time to review it. And we welcome your comments on it. But also welcome any discussion. But also feel free to take it, process it, and there are 30 days. When are we going to hold our public hearing on the citizen
We're gonna do
participation?
May 15th.
Do you
Uh,
get
4
a
o'clock.
attendance at this hearing?
It really depends. There are some, whenever there's money involved, we get a decent amount of attendance. And like, I think our housing workshop had over 100 attendees. Yeah, so the newsletter has reach, and when people care about it, they will attend. At our most recent paper hearing, which was last week, and there's no money, we're just saying, here's what we did last year, 0 people. It really varies. So people get the information because they show up when it matters,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily want to hear every single change that we make. Okay, that is this one. The slightly more time sensitive item is the survey that's in the back here. The survey is really the first big piece of public engagement that along with this that we'll be doing for our consolidated plan. And also I'm sensitive to the fact that it's nearly 7:30. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. But essentially, we really would like to get this out quite soon because frankly, a piece here that I'll be on St. Louis on the air tomorrow, and I want to be able to say, go take our survey and engage with the trust. Kaveh actually will be joining me. He is Kaveh as well as being participant in this process, is also a recipient of
Speaking
CDA.
of, how do I disclose that?
You should disclose it and then recuse from any decisions that in mind. But we thought, by the way, I'll comment on this because I think it's important. We had a long conversation. Do we include recipients of CDA funds on this committee? And we thought at the end of the day, that provided a very valid perspective on our CDA process. And also say again that the group was randomly selected from about 50 individuals, a few of which had CDA grant experience, some didn't, and we wanted to do in this committee and have
Full
everyone.
disclosure, CDA granting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
No, thank you.
Right.
Well, you're a real world experiment, so
Yeah.
we know how it went. That's good.
But any comments here on the survey? It's pretty straightforward.
I believe I did it already online, so would you all happen to have it?
It's not open yet, so. You may have done our disaster recovery survey.
I know I did a recent one maybe about a week ago or so. Okay,
What was it on?
I don't know, but it had the same questions and I thought it came from CDA. It had pretty much the same questions.
The same thing when I was looking.
Yeah, it had like the areas that I felt would be more important to revitalize, but they were the same questions. That's why I did not fill it out because I did want digital online.
Yeah.
This, first of all, really good to know because we know people are surveyed now and it's helpful to know that we're running.
It
But
took me probably about 5 to 10 minutes at the most. I know at least 5 minutes to go through all the questions. And that's why I say it pretty much was the same thing. So I don't know.
you also saw a similar one?
I've taken this.
That's what I was like.
So-
Can you skip past the demographic questions to like question 8 or 9?
Now, do you have a link or is this something? that
It's
you
not
have to-
public yet.
No,
It's not live.
Yeah, see, what I did was a link.
Yeah.
And everything was
You
done
all have that
online.
link?
Where'd you find it? Do you know?
Yes, I believe that's what.
Did you get an email? We
Clicking
said,
on the link, I
yay.
sent one of your
Yeah.
links back to where you.
Oh,
Back to
okay.
my email.
Okay. Send them the link. Oh.
No,
For me.
no,
Oh,
let-
newsletter?
No, let's,
no, I think I
let's-
just went on the,
I want to say
Consolidate
SLDC,
plan.
because our district manager is Gino Austin. I know he's been sending a lot of information. So that's the only people I believe that could have sent that. It was, let me pull this.
This is quite a mystery one.
Yeah.
Is it possible that it was the strategic land use plan, survey?
Yes, I say maybe after you said the name,
It was Tommy who saw it. He said it.
Oh.
There you go.
I'm asleep.
Okay.
Hold on, let's continue to investigate.
So with this survey, okay, because you talked about no one really comes out, so are you offering something for people to fill this out to get an accurate number? I'm just,
Yeah.
because I work with Transform SDL, it's just a not-for-profit. And they tried to do something like this and didn't get a response that they wanted, so they went to the library and started saying, if you fill this out, I'll give you $5 gift card, and then people like, oh, and then they sit down and start filling out, so that's what I was just wondering. And then we were able to see like what our community actually wanted, but you had to incentivize them to tell us what they wanted.
That was on March 15th for that survey.
Got it. It's a good idea, and I think the other really good idea is, I don't know whether we can offer cash incentives or not. We'll talk about this with you. But what we certainly can do is, I think, go where the people are.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's a really good idea in terms of going to libraries, going to recreation. Any other, we need to look at this survey and see how similar. it was.
Yeah, so that's what I was about to say. Do you all collaborate or work with SLDC when it comes to these surveys? Because a lot of these questions pretty much would be the same questions that you all are asking for the same areas that needs improvement or needs that push because of the benign neglect.
Yeah, this is a question I'm gonna toss to Tia in a moment, in terms of to what extent we can use other survey instruments that were not kind of, this uses HUD language, in terms of some of the eligible activities and categories, and to what extent we can use other services. I'll say in general, the strategic land use plan is a project led by the city's planning department. But we do all collaborate, PDA, CDA, so we all work on this floor, behind these walls, we all share a single office suite, we're in meetings with each other every day. Now, with that said, the conversation that we've been having citywide is on the need of some sort of central hub for community engagement. Because every single department is doing their own, And to your point, it is duplicative, and it reduces the quality of the responses you get as well. So I think that's a great point and something that I'd be curious, Tia, if we can use other survey instruments.
Yeah, anyway, there's a duplication. This is great because this is why exactly you guys are here. So if you know of surveys that are recent, like in the last 12 months, that have duplicative questions from this survey, we can eliminate that question from our survey and just use that data that you already received. As long as you're getting that data from, you know, like the population, like low income, homeless, elderly, disabled, you know, kind of the categories that this funding covers.
Thank you, Tia.
Two things that I wanted to ask is, one, can we get it on a link to whereas we can do it and it's easier? Because I printed it out and I'm looking at the questions after I printed all the pages. I'm like, I need the survey, but it's actually a different survey. And then two,
And yes, we can definitely send a link around. I think we may be able to send it around very shortly.
okay, we can skip because I just lost the train of thought on my second question.
Okay.
Was there a question around the survey?
Yes,
Do we think
essentially,
it's-
we'd like to release it soon. And so if there's any comments on the questions. And I think, by the way, this is not the only survey we will do. In my mind, I imagine a follow-up survey that drills down deeper into some of the housing questions, but this is an overall question.
And so now that you mentioned housing, I get a lot of feedback by going to some of the town halls, engaging with the community, sitting on the different committees and boards that I'm on. You have a lot of residents that's concerned with the homeless, housing issue and the fact that the residents are being forced, by politicians to, have housing in the residential neighborhoods, some residential neighborhoods where they don't want it. So I don't know if that's one of the questions that you put in the survey as to how they feel about, the homeless shelters or being put in their community and with or without their permission or approval. How do they feel about that? Because I'm getting some good and bad feedback from it, but for the most part, they're being imposed politically. And from experience myself, they make decisions for us and we're not happy. So I think one of the questions should be, you know, in there where we getting a survey, on the feedback from the residents on how they feel about it.
I think that's a great question. We can certainly add it to the housing specific survey. I think each survey, we don't want to get too long. And actually, I wrote about a dozen. Here's what happened. Yesterday, I wrote about a dozen housing questions and then realized we couldn't include them all in this survey. So I think that's another really good one to add.
Or we can ask the question and let them put their comment, some kind of comment on there. And they can
Yes,
probably
absolutely.
extend it.
I think the open comment point is essential. And I don't know, we do have another.
You know, and instead of doing like, oh, go ahead.
The other issue with the homeless is sometimes when they put one, then they put two or three in the same community. That's
It's the concentration here.
correct. That is a concern.
The fact that it's primarily concentrated in the near north side.
Right.
And down.
I think Tia has a comment.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, the last comp plan that I was a part of that I worked on, what we did to get some of those more pointed things is we had two different focus groups. One focus group was specific to housing and the development of housing. And the other one was specific to homelessness. And then there was public services and infrastructure. So there was like four different focus groups, actually, not two, on these subject areas where people could come and we could really have those in-depth conversations. I hadn't thought about doing another survey, but I know survey fatigue is a real thing. And trying to dive deeper into that might be something we want to visit about. But maybe this is where those focus groups would come in. Like this is when I would come to your community, facilitate each of these focus groups, and we'd have, you know, like big post-its on the wall. We'd be talking about the issues. It'd be very hands-on and interactive, to really get the feedback of each of those categories that you want to dive deeper into.
That's something that we can discuss as a committee. I don't think it's a decision we need to make today, but I think that's a great point.
Right.
So I looked this up. the strategic land use plan survey, it's not the same. The language is, it's just a lot of language.
Okay.
That kind of some of the same things, but it's not the same. We do have a QR code and a link
Okay.
for the public to take in. I think we just need you all to read through it and say, hey, this question doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, if it doesn't make sense, let us know, or if you need to explain it a little bit more.
When do you want to go back?
I'm so sorry. but- Yeah.
So I've got a question. So I'm curious if some of the way that the language around prioritizing these things sort of, everyone's got a different, you know, area that I think is important to them. So I wonder if prioritizing them against one another versus saying, what area are you specifically, you know what I mean? Like it
I think that's a great point. I want to note that we are not actually going to prioritize against.
Okay.
Here in the, even though you can't see it, if you open this up, it'll be like
high
high
priority.
priority,
High
medium
priority,
priority,
high
low.
priority. Got it,
You
got
can
it.
do multiple high priority.
Right. You mentioned follow-up, but, like a follow-up survey. I know a lot of times at the end of surveys, people ask, hey, do you want to provide your contact information? So if I have follow-up questions, so that would be a good option if they wanted to.
Or also like, do you want to be more engaged? Do you want to get on
Yeah.
CDA's newsletter? Do you want to?
Right.
Or if we hold a
Plug for
focus
you.
group, it could be,
Yeah, but would you be
Yeah.
interested in folks with
This
fun
could be a great
housing?
opportunity
Right.
for us to volunteer.
Are you getting us? Tia? Can you hear us? I have
Oh.
it. I'll send it to you.
We're getting some great feedback about adding requests for contact info if they want to be engaged in the process, if they want to join a focus group, if they want to get on our CDA newsletter.
Yeah, I did hear that. I think that's a great idea.
But yeah, I do apologize, but we'll be trying to turn this live around noon tomorrow. So sorry for the late notice.
That's the plan for the survey to go live at noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
And is there a way to push that out a little to get more
No.
feedback?
No.
Oh, shoot.
Because we have an opportunity to get a much broader audience than we otherwise.
Going on the radio tomorrow.
Well, I don't know what the frequency of these meetings will be, but I think we really should have a good conversation with the committee to get their input on how to set up those focus groups. And since the survey was kind of like, oh, here it is, and we're moving so quickly. But
I totally agree, and we can also do a follow-up.
yeah, and that's just the nature of these planning like this consolidated plan. It just goes as fast as can be, and we just don't want to leave anybody behind.
Is there any expectation that this survey would not always be up? Like, I mean, is it
No, it'll be
very
up for-
specific for what we're doing, or is it just something that will always live?
Good question. I would imagine we would take it down eventually, and maybe replace it with something a little bit more
Sure.
intentional.
I guess my point is like, it could always be updated and edited.
there could be version 2.0.
Right.
Yes, absolutely,
No reason to think that this is the final version we'll ever see this.
absolutely.
We do want people and residents to understand. I think that's the biggest part. Like,
Right, you just want to
Yeah,
make
it's
sure it makes sense.
understanding. That's the only thing I was gonna say. So I know a lot of people where I come from can't read some of these words. They're not gonna know facade right off the bat.
You know
They're
what's so
not gonna
funny? I
know
was just
litigation.
about the exact word. Wow.
There's certain words in here, I'm just like, I know they're gonna stumble on it and they're probably gonna pick anything. It's just the way it.
We
So,
can definitely do that. Any other words to be allowed for the other thing?
Is there, I can't recall, but is there somewhere in the survey where it says like translation services are provided? Not that it's translation so much as it is just kind of helping somebody through it.
this was an abatement, yeah.
This isn't about the wording, but question 28, I'm not really sure how to answer that one.
Open response. And I don't know, Tia, if you want to speak to the intent of that question. I think it's part of our analysis of impediments to fair housing, where we want to understand what barriers people face. And so they can kind of open respond, whichever option they want.
It might be helpful to add like, if you're a renter, if you're a homeowner, you know, just like, keep it open response, but just have two different fields or something for folks, so that like they understand like,
And I think
how am I
maybe,
answering this question? From what perspective am I answering this question?
and to your point, maybe other we specify isn't a sufficient prompt,
Right.
and then we want to provide slightly more guidance.
Or just working it, have you faced any barriers in terms of housing?
Exactly.
If so,
Yeah.
yes,
You're right, because
or explain more.
Yes,
or-
there you go. That's
or-
way better.
or not the answer.
That's way better.
It's just the way it's worded,
it assumes.
yeah.
And then for the question 18 about illegal discrimination, would it be possible to add like an open comment section? Because like discrimination can vary so much about what that would be.
Which question was that?
Number 18. It just says like how much have you done in discrimination?
Yeah,
Maybe like an ID next to it.
Like, yeah, like what, if you would, if you're comfortable,
So that's-
share when you're coming online.
Open
I-
response. That photo is actually in context.
The one could be like, you know, we tried like violent, someone could have a microaggression, I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. We'll add that.
I can't quite hear anybody past the middle of the table, so after Dr. Martin on, I can't really hear anybody.
Can you repeat what you just said? Oh, yeah, but I'd be a little louder. I was, talking about question 18, about the illegal discrimination. I was just saying, like, it'd be nice to maybe have like an open comment section, because discrimination can look like so many different things. Like a physical altercation or a microaggression or turning down an application. It could be so much, like a whole variety of stuff.
Sure.
And does the word illegal, like, is any discrimination good enough?
Just a little.
Very legal discrimination.
Maybe just discrimination.
I think the illegal pieces where like the fair housing and equal opportunity language comes in, like a lot of those analysis of impediment type questions are pretty prescribed. Particularly, you know, like with the if you've experienced illegal discrimination, because that's discrimination that something can be done about. But yes, I think that an opportunity to provide more detail would be very helpful for the analysis of impediments, and just make it a better document.
And this is a formatting thing. I would bold that sentence that describes what the legal housing discrimination is. Just bold it, just for people like me whose like eyes are scanning for like.
Illegal housing discrimination occurs when.
And I think to that point, number 18, now that you know it's fair, about fair housing, does number 18 read better?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we're talking
Like
about
within the
fair housing
context,
in the
right?
context,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Do we still think we need an open box for number 18? It was about fair
I
housing.
think I like the open box idea, because I think to Tia's point, when we're writing the analysis of impediments to fair housing, we can pull an example from there, right?
That's a good call.
So are
you
these-
providing answers to these questions to,
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of it.
are you required to provide answers to these survey questions to HUD that relates specifically to the choices that people have and how they respond? Like, are you providing data to folks like 25% of our respondents said they've experienced a lot of illegal discrimination versus are those quantifiers or qualifiers specific to how you need to present this data?
Yes, I think a lot of these are, Tia, go ahead.
Yeah, that language will it's all gonna be based on the surveys, and the surveys will have to be available. Like HUD's not gonna take it with the submission, but oftentimes those are included as appendices to the plans and the analysis of impediments itself. So HUD can look at those if they want, but it's not required to submit them. It's just gonna be kind of how we write that narrative. But there are quantifiable measures within the AI that we'll go through. And you could probably look at St. Louis's old AI to get an idea, or not old, I should say current, until we have a new one.
city of St.
What's-
Because I was thinking that we might want to put it on social media and we could get more respondents that way. But if you're not a city resident, we really don't want to.
Great point.
At this point, we could not have city county, but.
So we have, I think that's why the zip code is on there.
Yeah,
I
but
guess
there's
it
some
would be
zip codes
easier
that
to-
cut across.
Okay.
So you gotta, the city resident question's a good one.
I've done surveys before where it says, are you a resident of whatever city? And if you say no, then it's like, thank you, nice knowing you.
Thank you for your time. You don't get to talk all of your.
Right.
Were you gonna add something, Kevin?
For some reason, question 13 just feels like a bunch of different things. Like, I don't know why. This is like very gut reaction. But I'm wondering if like public facilities can be separate questions from public.
It used to be, we combined.
You combine them? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna contribute to the
We
seesaw effect.
we could separate them back out. What does
Well,
everyone
it just
else think?
seems funny that like I'm
Yeah.
prioritizing stormwater improvements and trails and multipurpose centers. You know what I mean? And I know you clarified that we're not rating them against one another, but it just,
That's what.
it's like, here's the
We
everything
can
else
absolutely
question.
separate them back out. What do anyone else?
Yeah, don't let me, my opinion.
Like put in parentheses, what's public service facility? I don't know.
Number 27.
We'll separate them back out.
Well, you have to think people might be doing this on their phone, so less
Oh.
is more.
Our question.
Yeah.
Good point.
Will you have time to incorporate all these changes before noon?
What is it built to?
Is this the 2.0 we're already talking about?
We'll send out an email.
Okay.
There's now an editable Google Doc.
Yeah, is it just a Google form?
Yeah.
It wasn't really-
It's not just a Google form, but.
Right.
With a little extra.
Oh, okay, I got a scenario. I don't know how this could be answered or addressed when it comes to discrimination when you don't have the class. But you are blackballed in a community where you don't side with the politicians or the leaders because they are a clique or a group. And because you're not, rolling with what they say roll, you are blackballed. And it could be a group of women against another one. So how do you address those issues if that's going on?
That's such an interesting question because I know it's not uncommon. Tia, is political discrimination? I don't believe political discrimination is a protected class.
No.
Essentially, when there's a limit at which obviously it becomes illegal. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's not a protected class.
So how do we address those issues? If you're dealing with someone that's in a community that's paying their taxes and doing the work, and there's nothing wrong, but that they're not going with what the political party. Thank you, thank you.
It's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you aside from the fact that I think St. Louis as a whole has to have a culture shift to become a little less siloed and a little.
People in your.
And a lot of business owners and investors are catching the wrath of that, and that's why a lot of these communities are not getting what they should get from private investors, and investors that are seeking grant funding. Those are roadblocks when you come to, needing the political support or approval, but then.
And I will say, I think this is a great flag that I don't think it's a protected class, but I think we can write to in our analysis of impediments for fair housing, that there are political impediments as well.
Correct.
I want to recognize that we're over time and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so, focus us back in.
Technical question. I assume questions 20, 21, 22, and 23 are if they answered yes on.
Yeah, there's conditional logic on this question.
Thank you.
And then I have just a thought on question 4. I don't know how much you want to get into use about census-like questions like this, but I work with an immigrant population. And so Black or African American can mean a lot, very different to African migrant. And I'm hoping that eventually St. Louis Census has a way to capture migrant data better. Same thing with Asian. East Asian's a lot different than Southeast Asian.
Middle
In
Eastern.
terms of Middle Eastern, yeah, And Asia's very big.
Just get.
Oh, I was Asian American for like 15 years on
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can do that, but it's just, I just want to vocalize that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, I was gonna say, I totally empathize with you on that. I hate the way census data collects information. I'm Native American, but there are other options, you know, and a lot of people who are of Hispanic descent don't want to mark white, you know, like they're like, I'm Mexican or, you know, whatever they are. And I understand that, but you know, our hands are tied with how HUD collects that data right now, so it has to be in that format. But I wonder if there would be an opportunity to add another question, like if you marked whatever, so that we could have our own data that we can put into the plan that is, it just builds off of it.
So something we did on an application was disclose why the choices were what they were.
Oh,
So I would say,
I like that.
you know, like this is, you know, HUD requires us to ask these questions or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Do we not care what sex the person is? Like, cause you might notice, I'm just saying, you might notice that more transgender people get discriminated against or females in housing. That's, I noticed that's one thing that's not on there.
Do we ask that on there? I don't remember.
No, we don't have a question about sex.
At all.
I would
It-
also explain that whole section about demographics that way.
What's that?
It's like displaying the whole section of demographics, like the reason we're asking these questions is so it's, yeah. Also, I'm sorry, I know we're
This is
now we're topping this thing up.
This is helpful. This is exactly what we want.
When you say average household income, do you mean combined? What do you mean average?
Yes, the household income is combined.
So what average? I don't understand the term average.
Change it.
What is your?
What is your household? Total.
Total
Total.
combined.
That's such a
Because
good
it's
point.
like
People
about
absolutely
all
misinterpret that. I make 30, they make 50, together our average is 20.
Is it an important question to ask if they've been through bankruptcy or have any evictions or any rental or mortgage, issues? Yeah, any hardships, because when it comes to funding, people that need the help, are they gonna appreciate the assistance that they have and value it and make sure that they're maintaining that house that they're getting assistance on?
yeah, and jumping on that, if you like have a prison record, right?
I think these are good questions for potentially a follow-up survey that goes
Okay.
deeper into housing,
Okay.
but I do want to not try to make it
Right,
too
yeah.
long. It's
Impossible for your
drop
team to
off.
edit by noon tomorrow.
And also these people will drop off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the stakeholder interviews that I'll be doing, like it would be contacting people that process evictions or people that work with populations that have been evicted, for example. So we will be hearing from the people that work with those people every single day in each category. So as we visit those stakeholders, I think we're going to get a lot of information that'll be good for the narratives. And they typically, like all the organizations that are stakeholders, they typically have data that they've collected that we can incorporate into this process as well. So we're not having to ask question after question after question because it's already been done, you know, kind of like what we were talking about earlier.
Is there a reason why we didn't include all of the HUD racial categories in this? Because you know, it's 12.
What's that?
Is there a reason we didn't include all the HUD racial categories in this? Because there's like 12.
How many are listed?
12, it's 12.
It's 12. So we
Oh,
make like-
well, and the way HUD collects the data is there's 5 options, your typical 5 options, but then the last 2 are supposed to be of 2 races or other race.
Oh,
So there shouldn't be 12, but I can look at that again too. That's something that I maybe didn't see.
I think you and Rashonda can connect offline and get these categories down.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a select all that apply, so you can pick all of the races that you are. It's not great. I feel you. I mean, It's just the way this country has been collecting data on the color of our skin for how years.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Okay, so next meeting.
Yeah.
Will be, what's, are Wednesdays good, or what is this?
We'd like to do it the first week of May. And there's a couple other items that I'll touch on before that
Yes,
as well.
first week of May.
But could we look at
Was it the first or the eighth? Because the first is the first Wednesday in May, and eighth is the second Wednesday.
I think we
Yeah,
probably look at the first.
first Wednesday for like May 1st,
Yes.
so.
I'm very impressed with turnout. I just have to say there were a lot of folks being here early, so it looks like Wednesday this time is good. Is that right? All right.
Yeah.
One second. Then I think, yeah, we can hold, for Wednesday, the first. Something else that we wanted to offer to you all is that, we think it would be helpful to give you all kind of more on the ground, tangible, idea of what the CDA funds. And so we were thinking of doing a tour for you all in the afternoon of either the 19th or the 26th. Do you all have a preference in terms of which of those would be better? May? No, this is April. Right.
So the 19th or what?
Geared towards current brand use footprints.
Yeah, exactly.
So Friday, Saturday, or
That's what I'm
Sunday, 19, 20, 21st.
What day you say, 19th to 26th?
19th or 26th, and we probably set aside an afternoon.
Friday afternoons.
Yeah, Friday afternoon.
As an alternate.
I'm sorry,
do I
what
just
month?
You can
July
try.
line?
April.
You're either one.
19th is better. If I'm official on this.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, 19th.
I'm fine with either.
Yes, same here, I'm fine with both of them.
Either. It's who are the two for the 26th?
Yeah.
You do, okay. You for the 19th, we'll do the 26th in that case.
What time would that be?
No, we'll plan around 1 PM. We'll finalize details as we get closer, but we'll plan to set aside a few hours, yeah, there's 1 or 2.
And this is what,
In person, we'll rent a bus and we'll go around to a bunch of CDA grantees and drive by most of them, but maybe stop by them.
Would be better.
I think I might want to come for that too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Down to you.
And I think we're looking at 2 PM on Friday.
Yeah.
is it 2 PM instead of 1?
Yeah.
So my-
You don't have to.
And we're meeting here, correct?
Yes, we'll meet.
Okay.
And so the parking garage is right next to.
Yeah, let's talk about parking.
Okay.
We talked about parking this morning. Too long, because it gets really complicated. But the point is that we're willing to validate, your parking, we want to validate for all your parking, but it gets really complicated logistically. I think they were saying that I need to run out with my card and go no, everyone's meters. No, how did most of y'all park? Did you park at Keel, City Hall, or meter?
Assuming it
I'll look
would be
at
enforced at 6 o'clock. start from the night.
City Hall, we can definitely validate easily. City Hall was easy for us. The meter, we're gonna have to figure out how to do.
So I have.
Oh, I assume if I park at a meter, it's on me.
Yes.
Yeah, City Hall's just. we
Yeah,
want
one
that.
here too.
What?
They can park at-
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, it's at.
No, did anyone park at Keel? It's closed right now, right?
Yeah, 3 people. They already got.
For Keel? Oh, great.
So we can't park right in.
And we can validate, yes, we can validate Keel, we can validate City Hall, meters, we can't validate.
Nobody got it. He was close to the city. What is it?
City Hall. Oh, okay, never mind. We can do City Hall, we can't do Keel or meter.
Well, if you in there, I think you stuck.
But, and
Yes.
Keel, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Well, there's a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look on your vehicle versus their gate.
You're gonna have to have a hefty bill for that.
I personally drive a Nissan Leaf.
Now, that's work.
The last comment I'll make is a little bit of formality. One is that this is a public body, so it's all subject to sunshine, so you should, we're streaming all these meetings. You should assume that any emails about this are sunshineable. I just want to level set that transparency
That's all.
for this body. Another question for you all, and is that while this is a public governmental body, it is an advisory group. And so it doesn't have to be, it's up to you all how formal you want to be. If you want to, at the next meeting, elect officers and have a chair and follow Robert's Rules of Order and do it all as formally as you want, you can. You also don't have to, and we can continue this just kind of informal, open dialogue. We don't have a preference because at the end of the day, our primary priority for this, that it's a dialogue, an authentic dialogue with the public.
Director, what are the things that we gotta do? Somebody got, or you guys, or your staff gonna do all the work, or is it something that, I mean, it's something we need to accomplish?
What we need to accomplish is that on November 15th, we will submit our consolidated plan and our action plan to HUD. You are not expected to draft or do any of the substantive work to make that happen. Your role in this is to provide us with feedback, so review the materials that we provide to you, and let us know if we're on the right track, if we're missing something, and guide us in this work.
Better question would be, does the committee, does the citizens of the committee have the driving force?
No, this is an advisory committee. The city is driving the process and seeking kind of a back and forth.
I'd say in terms of word of office, this process, I'm fine saying.
Definitely not Robert's Rules.
The gavel like
I'll bring it next time. In that case, I'll open it up for any final comments, and then it's 8 o'clock. We'll try and keep these to an hour and a half moving forward. Appreciate your generosity with your time for this person. But any final comments?
I want to say thank you for the opportunity to sit at the table and be a part of this process. It is very exciting to me. It is a learning process so that I can get to know more people and engage with people.
We're delighted to have you and everyone here at the table. I think we got a great group, so thank you, random selection. Because seriously, I think I'm looking forward to this process with you.
Thank you.
I want to say the same thing too. You pick some real good people. Very hard for me to come in the room and like people. About the political stuff. Yeah, I had something like that, but what happened is I was such a thorn in their side. They always wrote me out every 10 years. They sent me to somebody else. So those politicians will freeze you out if you keep your mind on when you truly for the community.
We're gonna stick to the 90 minutes, so if I'm gonna get documents out to you all as soon as possible, you can review them. So we can just go right into the feedback. Molly has to be within the stuff.
Another question real quick I have is, this is 6 to 7:30. This is kind of lunchtime. Do we want lunch?
Dinner there.
I don't need lunch every Thursday.
He doesn't. I try to give him a lunchtime. It depends on what kind of.
We have one,
Depending on.
you have one choice. It's pasta house. Pasta house is the one city HUD CDA approved. Seriously? Yeah.
That's very much.
Greek line is Panera.
Someone, Tucci got in there early, I guess. That's how pasta house is ruined. Yeah. I scrambled to eat before I got here, so theoretically it would be appreciated, but.
Right, that's why I'm sitting here.
All right, well, we'll have something next time. We'll have some pasta. There's no mystery. One time, Pasta House Peter's the first open house in Space.
Oh, wow.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Keep this so we don't have to make.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. I think we're all done. Thanks, Tia.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.